بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. To proceed, well, today inshallah we will need to finish as much as we can, because I intend that next week will be the last session on the fourth maxim, al-mashaqqa tajlib al-taysir, hardship begets facility, because we need to move on to the next one, al-aada muhakkama, customs are authoritative. So we were doing what now? We're doing the subsidiary maxims, al-Qawaaid al-Far'iyya. Under al-Mashaqqa tajlib al-Taysir, hardship begets facility. And there are 9 Qawa'id. Of course, someone can say there are like 200 Qawa'id. As I told you, some people say that the Qawa'id are about 50. Some people say that all of the Qawa'id are about 50, and some people say 200, and some people say thousands. So, but anyway, it depends on how you look at it. Even some of these Qawa'id that we will mention today can be condensed or merged together. But if you think about the mashaqqa tajlib al-taysir, hardship begets facility, there are 2 concepts that are very relevant to this discussion: the concept of al-darura and the concept of al-haja, concept of necessities and the concept of needs. And necessities or needs are different. Mashaqqa is basically when you're denied a necessity, when you're denied a need. So if you think about this whole concept, you will be able to see why these 9 maxims are important. Which maxim did we start with? Subsidiary maxim, at-taklif mashroot bil-qudra, which is obligation is conditional upon capacity, ability. That is the basis, that's the rationale, that's the legal basis for everything that will come after, taklif mashroot bil-qudra. And then the second one that we started to discuss is الضرورات تبيح التكليف مشروط بالقدرة. And then the other one is الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. What was that? Necessities permit prohibitions. Necessities permit prohibitions. Obligation is conditional upon ability. And then the third one that we covered is إذا ضاق الأمر اتسع وإذا اتسع ضاق. And why did we have it after these 2? Because this is now going to move us to the next batch of subsidiary maxims that we will discuss today. Why? Because this means what? When there is a hardship, the matter is basically eased, or when it is tight, it expands, and when spaciousness returns, it tightens. So when there is hardship, the rulings expand. The rulings, are made more lenient because of the hardship, and so on. And then when ease returns, the original ruling returns. Okay, so this one, the first half of it belongs to the Qawa'id before it. When it's tight, it expands. And then the second half of it belongs to the Qawa'id that we will address now. These Qawa'id that we will address today are regulatory Qawa'id. They regulate these concepts. They regulate the concept of الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. Necessities permit prohibitions, because this qaida has to be regulated. Otherwise, it can be used as a basis for rebellion against the Sharia and basically unacceptable laxity. So now, وَإِذَا اتَّسَعَ ضَاقَ, when ease returns, then the original rulings return. And everything that we will discuss now relates to that second half. One of the Qawaaid that, one of the regulatory Qawaaid that we will discuss today is الضرورات تقدر بقدرها. الضرورات تقدر بقدر. This means what? Necessities are judged according to their extent. Their extent. Necessities are judged according to their extent. And then there is another one. ما جاز لعذر بطل بزواله. ما جاز لعذر بطل بزواله. So this is about the extent, this is about the time. So what was permitted for an excuse, because of an excuse, ceases or ends. How did I translate it? Lapses when it ends. Lapses when, upon its cessation. When it ends upon its cessation. The cessation of the excuse. Okay, and then we have another one that we will discuss today. البدل مقام المبدل. And there is like a genre of قواعد related to al-badal and al-mubdal, but we will come to them shortly. Al-badal wal-mubdal. So al-badal is the substitute, al-mubdal is the original. The qawa'id that pertain to al-badal and al-mubdal. The badal takes the ruling of the substitute takes the ruling of the original. You cannot combine the substitute and the original. The substitute can be only resorted to, or recourse to the substitute is only allowed when the original is unavailable or absent. And what else? Once you have the original, the ruling of the substitute is invalidated. All of these qawa'id are combined together. I put them as one qaida. Substitute and original. Okay, so then we will have two other qawaid. One of them is المعصية لا تكون سببا للنعمة, and the other one is الاضطرار لا يبطل حق الغير. المعصية لا تكون سببا للنعمة. معصية is what? Sin is not a cause, is not a cause for blessing. Actually, I may use the other phrasing for this qaida because the other phrasing is a little bit clearer. الرخص لا تناط بالمعاصي is the other phrasing for this qaida. الرخص concessions لا تناط are not attached to. المعاصي sins or acts of disobedience. So رخص concessions are not attached to acts of disobedience. الرخص لا تناط بالمعاصي. The final one, the final qaida that regulates the concept of darurat. We all are talking today about the qawa'id that will regulate the concept of darurat. is a very, very important قاعدة. الاضطرار لا يبطل حق الغير. الاضطرار لا يبطل حق الغير. حق الغير. Which means what? Necessity does not invalidate. Did I translate it as invalidate? Nullify. Nullify the rights of others. Rights of others. And anyways, these are the 5 قواعد that we will go over today. What they do is they regulate الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 قواعد we will try to go over today. Then we would have regulated الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. And next week, inshallah, if we finish all of this today, I hope so. Next week, inshallah, we'll be going over الحاجة تنزل منزلة الضرورة عامة كانت أو خاصة, which means what? That needs take the rulings of necessities, whether they are private or public. And, you know, it's a discussion. It's something that will require a lot of discussion. That's why we will have an entire session just for this subsidiary قاعدة, the قاعدة about al-Haj. Because after we understand the concept of darurat, we need to understand the concept of hajat, necessities and needs. Because not everything is, you know, so human beings have what? Necessities, needs, and wants. Right? So not everything you want you need, and not everything you need is essential for your survival. So these are the 3 different levels. And in other terms, we can call these what? Darurat, hajat, tahsiniyat. You know, the wants are the tahsiniyat. They call them embellishments. Embellishments. So your life will be better with them. Your life will be better with them. Like you can't go to, like if there are no public transportations, a car will be a necessity, because otherwise you'll be stuck at home. You're not going to be able to go, you know, buy food. So, but then, you know, a car that has AC in a very hot weather will be a need. And then a luxury car will be a want or embellishments, tahsiniyat. It doesn't hurt. I mean, if it has, you know, these features and, you know, like the buttons and stuff that bring the chair, you know, up front to push it back and all of that stuff. These are embellishments. So we're not going to be talking about embellishments under this qaida. Embellishments don't have a place here. Does that mean that Islam is against tahsiniyat? No. We consider this to be one of the things that are good to have. But we will not change the rulings for embellishments, for tahsiniyat. The rulings will change for darurat for sure. Some rulings will change for hajat for sure. Some rulings, certain prohibitions, certain types of prohibitions will change for hajat, yes. Everything changes for darurat, yes. With these regulations, yes, everything changes for darurat with these regulations. Many things, not all, change for hajat? Yes. What about tahsiniyat? Why are we not talking about this at all? Because although Islam does not, discourage us from having that tahsiniyat, these embellishments that will make life better and easier and more beautiful, certainly there would not be any change of rulings just for tahsiniyat, so that we can have those luxuries. Okay, let's start with the first qaida, الضرورات تقدر بقدرها, which means what? Necessities are judged according to their extent, according to their extent. So that which is necessity permits will only be permitted to the extent required to relieve the necessity. The extent required to relieve the necessity, no more. So once ease returns, إذا اتسع ضاق. The rulings, the original rulings return. It's tightened back. The original rulings return. So applications, a lot of applications. Eat and carrion, eat and carrion. Can you eat beyond satiety? Can you eat more maita beyond satiety? By consensus, no. By consensus, no. Can you eat to satiety? Or are you only eating to ward off starvation? Our madhab says in the authorized view, you're only eating to ward off starvation. You cannot get full. You cannot get satiated on maita, carrion. You only need to ward off starvation. However, it has been said in our madhab as well that you can eat to satiety. And they say that you can eat to satiety particularly if the necessity is ongoing. It's an ongoing necessity. So if you find maita, carrion, in the middle of the desert, and you're afraid like you can't carry it, and you're afraid that you will not be able to find any other food, for the next 100 miles, you can eat satiety in this case. Okay, so why are we saying this? Because we're permitting the prohibited to the extent that the darura is basically relieved. Now, repelling an assailant, and this is part of the beauty of Islam, that even an assailant has rights. Even the zalim, the oppressor, will have rights, and we will discuss this, more today and more later, inshallah. Even oppressors have rights. So the assailant, if they can be deterred by words, you don't use force, you don't use physical violence, and you use physical violence to the extent that the assailant will be deterred, all the way up to killing them. But if basically, breaking their arm will do it, then you don't kill them. If hitting them with a stick will do it, then you don't hit them with a sword. Things like that. Just you don't use more severe means if lesser ones would suffice. A physician may uncover the awra that is required for treatment. Of course, you have to be moderate about this, because sometimes a physician may need to, like if you have appendicitis, you can't just show the physician this area and say, so sometimes the physician may need to see a little bit more to make proper diagnosis. But at the end of the day, they are not uncovering awra they don't need to uncover for the purpose of diagnosis and treatment. We wipe over al-jabira. Jabira splint, we wipe over al-jabira. If the jabira did not exceed what? Did not exceed the area needed to wrap it well. Because sometimes you're, like the wound is here, but you can't, the jabira will have to extend, or the break is here, but the jabira will have to extend it from here to here. If you need a splint from here to here for a fracture that is here, that is fine. The area that is needed for proper wrapping of the jabira or the splint, if it extends beyond this, you have to remove it. You have to remove it. What if removing it will cause harm? What do we do in this case? In the madhab, we make tayammum. So we wipe over the jabira, we make our wudu complete, except for the area that is covered by the jabira. And we wipe over the jabira, and we make tayammum. Why are we making tayammum and not just simply wiping over the jabira? Because it went beyond the area needed, later. It went beyond the area needed for proper wrapping. And then, is it disambiguation? Is it unclear, or you're gonna branch off? No, I didn't talk about having wudu or not having wudu. I'm talking about the extent. Did you go beyond, or you did not go beyond? Did you go beyond the area that needs to be wrapped, or you did not go beyond the area that needs to be wrapped? Of course, in the mu'tamad of the madhab, you need to wear it after having wudu. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the extent that you covered. Have you covered more than needed, or you have just covered what is needed? If you covered more than needed, you make tayammum as well. Now, they even say in the madhab that you don't stay in the lavatory, you don't stay in the bathroom, in the place where you relieve yourself longer than necessary. It's actually prohibited in the madhab, because that's, uncovering the aura for no good reason. But the other report in the madhab is that it's only disliked. It's only disliked. So you could apply this to our times. You could apply this to, don't sometimes we have several Friday prayers because there is no room or parking or this or that? Right or wrong? Right. Okay. How many of them should we have? If 2 will suffice, 3 would be forbidden. If 1 would suffice, 2 would be forbidden. If 2 would suffice, 3 would be forbidden, to the extent needed to relieve the necessity. A suitor may look at his prospective spouse only to the extent needed to assess compatibility. A suitor would look at potential wife to the extent needed to ascertain compatibility, or to ascertain, acceptance. What is that extent? There's a lot of disagreement over that extent. But in our madhab, the things that usually appear, hands, feet, the neck, stuff like this. And Ghulam al-Khallal added to this that she doesn't have to wear a head cover, like يمكن أن يراها حاسرة, bare-headed. If one finds, another one, if one finds 2 dead animals, one unanimously prohibited and the other not. You find 2 dead animals. You find a dead elephant and a dead pig. Which one you eat? The dead elephant, because it's controversial. You find a dead crocodile and a dead dog. Which one you eat? The crocodile. You find a dead dog and a dead pig. Which one you eat? dog because it's still controversial. You know, the Malikis would allow it. But they get offended when you say that. But anyway, but it's not controversial. So you eat the dog, not the pig. You eat the crocodile, not the dog. You eat the elephant, not, you know, the rest of the stuff. Okay. If it might be claimed that the permission of araya belongs to, you know, permission of araya is an exclusion from this qaida. Because we say darurat tuqaddar biqadriha, necessities are judged by their extent. In the araya, the Prophet ﷺ allowed, you know, forms of riba in this particular exception, which is to trade fresh dates for tamr, dried dates. And why did he allow this? Because poor people would only have dried dates and they wish to eat fresh dates in the season where you have fresh dates. And they will like, they don't afford to pay for it in cash. So they trade the dried dates for the fresh dates on the palm trees. And involved in this transaction, about 3 major prohibitions involved in this transaction. And the Prophet ﷺ allowed it. So he allowed it, why? Because those poor people need to, like, want to eat fresh dates. So it's not a darura. And at the same time, he, you know, allowed it, you know, to a large extent. You could treat like 1 wasq, 2 wasq, 3 wasq, 4. So what is that? Like, where is that coming from? So is that an exclusion from this qaida? This belongs to the qaida of al-Hajat tanzil manzilat al-darurat. We will address this in more detail next week, inshallah. A related issue, one who can perform part of an act of worship but cannot finish the act of worship. We have a principle here called ma la yudrak kulluhu la yutrak julluhu. That which cannot be attained in its entirety should not be abandoned in its entirety. So the default here is what? The default is whenever you're unable to perform the whole ibadah, you perform of it as much as you can. That's the default. Default is based on what? Whenever I command you to do something, do of it as much as you can. Allah saying, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, then fear Allah as much as you can. So you do as much as you can. But it is not simply like that. It's not always like that. So we will have to talk about the different categories. So Sheikh al-Shatri says, does incapacity to perform part of the obligation nullify the obligation entirely? He says there are 2 categories and one in between them. 2 categories and one in between them. He says there are obligations that cannot be divided. And he mentions 2 examples. One is clear, or at least agreed upon in the madhab, to free a slave. If you're required to free a slave and you can only free half a slave, then you move on to the alternatives. You move on to alternatives because the Sharia intends the complete emancipation. Wants complete emancipation. You're unable to emancipate the slave completely, then you move on to alternatives. But he mentions another example about indivisible obligations. If you have, you know that in Zakat al-Fitr, if you have a sa more than your needs, you give 1 sa per each member of the household. If you have more than what you need for yourself on the day of Eid, if you have more than what you need for yourself and your household on the day of Eid, you give 1 sa per each member of the household. What if you don't have 1 sa? What if you're given Zakat al-Fitr for yourself only and you have half a sa? What would you do? So he says here that this is indivisible. Indivisible. You don't need to give anything. The right position in the madhab is what? It is divisible. You give whatever you have. The right position, the authorized position, the madhab, you give whatever you have. So even when it comes to application, they disagree. These are two different positions in the madhab. One position says this is not divisible. If you don't have a sa', you don't give anything. Another position says if you have half a sa', give it. And that is the authorized position. Give it. But in general, if it is indivisible, he says that his classification, we will come to Ibn Rajab's classification. The Imam Ibn Rajab has like a four-pronged classification that's a little bit more nuanced than this. But Sheikh Saad, he says that it's just like two-pronged classification, and then there is one in the middle in between. Can be divided, things that can be divided. So for the things that cannot be divided, we say what? ما لا يتباعد فاختيار بعضه كاختيار كله وسقوط بعضه كسقوط كله. So that which is indivisible, choosing part of it is like choosing all of it, and dropping part of it is like dropping, or waiving part of it is like waiving all of it. But things that are divisible, what do we say here? Al-maysur la yasqut bil-ma'sur. That which is attainable is not waived because of that which is unattainable. Meaning, I can cover part of my aura, but I can't cover all of my aura. Cover whatever you can. Cover whatever you can. So this is divisible. And al-maysur la yasqut bil-ma'sur here, which what is attainable is not nullified by what is unattainable. There are certain things that fall between the two, such as wudu, if a person is unable to wash all limbs. Unable to wash all limbs. Like, let's say you have enough water to wash half of your wudu limbs. What do? Do you resort to tayammum and forget about washing? Or do you use whatever water you have to wash whatever you can and then make tayammum for the rest? What does the madhab say? You use the water to make as much as, to wash as much as you can and make tayammum for the rest. So the madhab seems to be favoring what? Do as much as you can. Do as much as you can. So Ibn Rajab says in his 8th qaida, if one is able to perform part of an act of worship but is incapable of completing the rest, does he remain obligated to perform what he is able to or not? And he says that there are categories, and he mentions 4 categories. 1, the part one is capable of is not intended as an act of worship itself. Is not intended as an act of worship itself. So there is something, there are babies that come out basically naturally circumcised. There are, naturally circumcised. Like they don't have foreskin, basically, to cut. And there are people who are bald. What are they going to do when they go to Hajj? Like they really have no hair. It's not like they shave it, they just don't have it. So what are they going to do? Do they need to pass the razor over their head? Do we need to pass the razor over the foreskin, like the tip of the organ, if the baby comes out naturally circumcised? These are called means, simply means to fulfill the act of worship. They are not intended in and of themselves. So they are simply means. And in this case, we say what? No, you don't have to, by consensus. The disagreement is what? Or, the discussion is about what? Is it better still to do it? Like when you go to Hajj. So they will say yustahab. It's preferred that you do it symbolically, to pass the razor. Don't wound yourself, but just like pass the razor like this over your head. Now, another one they said that you don't need it. It makes no sense. If you cannot, like people who are mute and are unable to recite, do they still have to move their tongue? So al-Qadi says yes, but that's a weak position in the madhab. So if the act that you're capable of doing is not meant for itself, but just a means to fulfill the act of worship, then when the act of worship itself is beyond your capacity, you don't need basically to fulfill the means to it. There are certain things, the second category, certain things that are subsidiary, complementary. So you have certain things that are obligatory as a precautionary measure, such as what? You need to wash a little bit more. You need, like when you wash your face, you need to wash a little bit of your hair to make sure that you washed all of your face. When you wash your elbow, you need to wash a little bit more to ensure that you have included the mirfaqain, included the two elbows. What if your arm is cut off and you have that side of the elbow, not that side? You have that side. Do you still need to wash the surface of the elbow? Your arm is cut off here. Do you need to still wash the surface of the elbow? In the madhab, they say yes. You have to abstain part of the night to ensure that you have abstained all of the day in fasting. Just to make sure that you have abstained the entire day, you have to abstain even a few seconds of the night to make sure that you have abstained the entire day. Now, if you're not going to be fasting, do you have to abstain that part of the night? No, you don't. Now, under the second category, there is like another category within the second category when the obligatory is a complement or an ancillary to something else, such as stoning the Jamarat and sleeping over in Mina. If you miss Arafah, do you still need to do that? Do you still need to do the Jamarat if you miss Arafah? Huh? But are you still required to stone the Jamarat? I know it's invalid. Everybody knows it's invalid. Your Hajj is invalid. But you still need to stone the Jamarat. I heard yes and no. We have the two answers in the madhab. But what is authorized? You don't. What is authorized? You don't. But we have the two answers in the madhab. Some said yes, some said no. Now, if the third category, if a part of the act, but it is a part of the act, but is not an act of worship in itself, and it doesn't, or it entails harm, like it's part of the act, but it would not count as an act of worship. Fasting part of the day. If you're not going to be able to finish the day in fasting, should you still fast until Dhuhr? Because you're able to fast until Dhuhr. We got yes and no? Okay. In the madhab, it is no by agreement. Nobody said yes. No by agreement. Because there is no worship called fasting until Dhuhr. Freeing part of a slave in kafara, not required because the lawgiver intended full emancipation, that also. Then the fourth category, a component of the act of worship, the thing that you're able to do is a component of the act of worship and is also in and of itself an act of worship. So this would be obligatory to do without disagreement, such as what? You're unable to recite the whole Fatiha. Should you recite whatever you can. Someone, someone memorized, a new Muslim, memorized all the way up to إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Should we tell him you must memorize all the way up to إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ? Yes. Someone is unable to recite. Should he still stand up? Of course, because that's another pillar. Although standing is meant for recitation, but it's still an act of worship in and of itself. Unable to do your full ritual purification, ghusl al-janaba, you're unable to do all of it. Should you wash as much as you can? Yes, you wash as much as you can. So there are debated cases. We talked about one of them, unable to wash all parts of your body in wudu. Two positions in the madhab. Go to tayammum right away, that's the weaker position. Use whatever water you have to wash whatever parts you can, and then make tayammum, that's the stronger position. And we talked about the sa' al-fitr, sa' zakat al-fitr issue. Okay, so if we want basically to understand this better, I have a diagram. You guys got the document and you saw the diagram. I have a diagram. Let's go over the diagram. So these are now acts that you're able to perform, but you can't perform the whole act. These are parts of acts of worship you're able to perform. We said that Ibn Rajab's classification is four-pronged. So we will say here, it is in and of itself an act of worship. In itself, worship. You must perform by agreement. You must do it by agreement. If that part of the act is in itself an act of worship. Not an act of worship, not worship, or entails harm. Waived by agreement. Waived by agreement. You don't need to fast until Zuhr. Is a precaution. Precaution does part of the act remains or no? Part of the act remains or no? Part of the act remains like in wudu. So you're washing the other side of the elbow for amputated arms. You're washing that other side of the elbow because the rest of the wudu remains. But if I am not fasting today, do I need to abstain part of the night to ensure that I do not break my fast? Well, I'm not fasting. The act of worship is not existent anymore. I don't need to exercise that precaution. No. So this is the fasting, this is the wudu. The last one, not an obedient, not an objective act, but a means. A means. So it is not in and of itself an act of worship or even part of the act of worship. It is a means to the act of worship. The razor over your head, or circumcision, or moving your tongue if you're unable to recite. all of these things by agreement are not required, but they may be recommended. Why are they recommended? Symbolically, an acknowledgement. Yeah, you know, I have no hair, but I want to acknowledge that shaving is part of Hajj, and I will do it. Just pass the razor over my head. Okay, next. So this is the first regulatory قاعدة. الضرورات تقدر بقدرها, which means that necessities are judged according to their extent. Now another related قاعدة, this one is related to the magnitude, the extent in the sense of magnitude. The next one is about the lapsing of the permission upon the cessation of the necessity. So what is permitted by excuse lapses when it ends. ما جاز لعذر بطل بزواله. Another qualifier of the major قاعدة ضرورات تبيح المحظورات. Some of the applications, the proverbial what? Proverbial إذا حضر الماء بطل التيمم. This is proverbial. When there is water, tayammum is invalidated. You know, this is a, like, people say this all the time. إذا حضر الماء بطل التيمم. When there is water, tayammum is invalidated. When one regains the ability to recite al-Fatiha, they no longer can substitute it with what? Dhikr. Don't we say that if someone is unable to recite al-Fatiha, they just make dhikr? You say Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah. But once you learn the Fatiha, you're not allowed to substitute. Concessions are granted due to illness end upon recovery. Concessions granted due to travel ends upon return home. So this qa'ida is very clear, very straightforward. But sometimes they differ over a few things. So Ibn Rajab in his 7th qa'ida says, if one begins an act of worship, then before completing it, he gains access to something that would have been what's obligatory had he found it before he started the act of worship, so on. Just let me tell you that it's just two categories. You began the worship. Okay, so just to simplify, you found water after you started to pray. You sent to someone to look for water, and you started to pray. You made tayammum, you started to pray, and the person that you sent to look for water came back running. I found water, I found water. What do you do now? Did you go? Did you end your prayer, or you continue your prayer? Because when you started the prayer, you started like on a good standing. You know, I did my best. So they disagreed. What is the mu'tamad of the madhab? You end the prayer. Why do they say this? Because in the mu'tamad of the madhab, which is different from the Hanafis, in the mu'tamad of the madhab, التيمم مبيح ليس رافع ليس رافعا. So tayammum does not remove the impurity, permits the prayer without removing the impurity. So you still have the impurity, but you're permitted to pray with the impurity. And certainly this is a matter of disagreement within the madhab. Some in the madhab say that tayammum removes the impurity. And if you say it removes the impurity, you will be inclined to say what? Carry on with your prayer. Don't worry, you started the prayer in a good standing, carry on with your prayer. People who say that it does not remove the impurity, it permits the prayer, they will say, you know there is water now. Could you continue praying with impurity? So anyway, there is a difference between when you have alternatives for ease, such as the case of tamattu. The case of tamattu, Allah gives us different alternatives. So if you don't slaughter, if you don't have hadi to slaughter you're mutamatta in Hajj. You don't have hadi to slaughter. What does Allah allow you to do? Fast. Okay, I started fasting. And then I found hadi, or I have enough now to purchase. What do I do? In the madhab, they say, carry on with your fasting. Don't worry about it, because these are alternatives that Allah had given you for ease. But there are certain alternatives that Allah had given you in the case of necessity, not simply for ease. Let's take this as an example. If you begin fasting in the kafara of zihar, you know, in kafara of zihar, what is the first obligation in the kafara of zihar? And breaking your oath, freeing a slave. I mean, there are no slaves, but you know, imagine. Freeing a slave is the first kafara, expiation. You start, okay, you didn't find a slave to free, and you started to fast, and all of a sudden you have enough money or you found a slave to free. What do? Huh? Carry on with your fasting. Wrong. You know, it will, in the madhab, in the case of tamattu', you know, we're saying that, in the case of tamattu', we're saying that these are concessions that were given to you for ease. Here, kafara is a disciplinary action against you. So you're not given basically leniency here. You made zihar, you broke an oath, so we will not be lenient with you. So you need to fulfill the obligation. The wife dies. That's actually a very neat question. What happens if the wife dies before he actually I don't know, because in the actually I don't remember. Certainly he cannot resume relationship with the wife without making the kafara. But she's asking, what if the wife dies before you make the kafara? And we'll look this up, inshallah. There are other issues that are debated within the madhab. Okay, I think we've covered this. But in general, when you have alternatives and those alternatives are for ease, and you start one of them, you don't need to go back, you know, if you find the other one. But when you have alternatives that are allowed, in the case, like for necessity, you do not find a slave, period, you know. Okay, how do you differentiate between you did not find like an animal to slaughter, the first one, and you did not find a slave, the second one? In the second one, if you can buy one on credit, you're obliged to buy one on credit. If you have the ability to buy one on credit. In the first one, if you can buy hadi on credit, you're not obliged. Even if you're wealthy at home, and you say, just take it on credit, take this sheep on credit, you don't have to. You can still fast. But in the kafara, you are required to buy one on credit if you are able to. Now the next one, يقوم البدل مقام المبدل والمصير إلى البدل إنما يجوز عند عدم الأصل فإذا وجد المبدل بطل حكم البدل ولا يصح الجمع بين البدل والمبدل. The sixth subsidiary maxim, the substitute takes the place of the original, and recourse to the substitute is permitted only when the original is unavailable, and when the original is found, the ruling of the substitute is nullified, and it is not valid to combine the substitute and the original. We'll quickly go over them. So everything that has a substitute, when the original is unattainable, the substitute is used. يقوم البدل مقام المبدل, which means what? The substitute takes the place of the original. Tayammum, water. You can't fast certain days, and during Ramadan, you can make up afterwards, then you make up afterwards. Salat al-Khawf in place of Salat al-Amn, the prayer of fear. Unable to pray, you do the prayer of fear. So the issue here is that only if the original is unattainable, recourse is made to the substitute. If someone unlawfully seizes something and returning it becomes impossible, what do we do? Then he should spend it in public charity, public sort of whatever interests, because here the original obligation to return it to the rightful owner unattainable. Then we resort to a badal, a substitute. If it's not possible to carry out qisas is not possible to carry out because you cannot ascertain that there will not be transgression in carrying out the qisas. There are certain wounds and things that if you try to replicate, you can transgress. You cannot accurately, now with advanced surgery and stuff like this, there is a lot more room to replicate wounds and injuries without excess, without transgression. But if you cannot do it without transgression, then you resort to blood money or financial compensation. When the original becomes available, the ruling of the substitute is nullified. If a young girl becomes menstruating during her iddah, what do we do? Does she count her iddah by months or by, like she already started, she finished 2 months and then she started to menstruate? Then she will have to resort to counting by periods, not by months, even though she finished 2 months, because counting by months was a badal, a substitute for counting by periods. And it is not permissible to combine between al-badal and al-mubdal, the substitute and the original, such as what? Like fasting and sacrificial animal, slaughtering a sacrificial animal and fasting for tamattu. Like qisas and diya, equal retribution and blood money. You don't combine the two, it's just one or the other. Ibn Rajab's 143rd قاعدة says, يقوم البدل مقام المبدل ويسد مسده ويبنى حكمه على حكمه في مواضع كثيرة ومنها the substitute takes the place of the original, fulfills its function, and its ruling is based on that of the original in many cases. Among them, if he wipes over the khuf and then removes it, what does he do? Ibn Rajab here says he washes his foot. He washes his foot. That's not the madhab anymore. That's the position that he sort of favored in his time. The madhab is that it's invalidated. The madhab is that it's invalidated. And Imam Taqiyuddin said it's not invalidated. You still have wudu. So you made wudu, you wiped over your socks, and then you took off your socks. So the madhab says your wudu is invalidated. Imam Taqiyuddin said it's not invalidated. And this is another position in the madhab also, it's not invalidated. But Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, Imam Ibn Rajab said here, it would be sufficient to wash your feet only. Because he considers the wiping as a substitute for washing. So your wudu was complete and there was muwala, and all the way up until you took your socks off, the substitute takes the ruling of the original washing. Now that you took your socks off, after 3 hours, you could still wash your feet, and that does not violate the muwala that is required in the madhab in wudu, to wash the parts, to wash, continuity like of wudu. That is not violated, because up until you took off your socks, you still had the ruling. If 40 individuals replace another 40 individuals in Jum'ah, you still have a quorum. If a zakatable nisab is exchanged for another of the same category, zakatable nisab is exchanged for another of the same category. What is the same category? So what is one category? In the madhab, so there's a little bit of controversy here, but currency, like gold and gold, silver and silver, it is the same category. Livestock and livestock, same category. What about gold and silver? Not gold and gold, gold and silver. Shafi'is will say that interrupts the year, the hawl. There is an interruption. We say no interruption. Gold and silver are the same category. They are substitutes for each other. They are the same category. What about currency and trade goods? No interruption. They are substitutes for each other, same category. And the Shafi'is agree with us on this, but they disagree on the gold and silver one. The gold and silver one. Okay, so within the same category, no interruption of the hawl. If it is not within the same category, there is interruption of the hawl. If you have a nisab of silver, and then it switches to a nisab of gold, the year is not interrupted. You build on when you started to have a nisab of silver, you build from there. The year is not interrupted. If the skin of sacrificial animals, you know that you can sell skin of sacrificial animals, but can you trade it for household items? Skin of sacrificial animals is considered a household item that you can use. Can you trade it for household items? They say yes, although you can sell it. The same applies to replacements of awqaf. Can you replace a waqf? تعطلت منافعه. A waqf that is in disuse, falls into this repair. Or a mosque, the community left, the neighborhood. Can you replace the waqf? In the madhab, yes. In other madhab, no, by the way. So the mosque stays a mosque regardless what. In the madhab, yes. But there is a disagreement in the madhab over what? If you have a better waqf, this one has not fallen into disrepair, but there is a better one that he can replace it with. He can sell this waqf, buy a better waqf, permissible or not. Two positions in the madhab. What's authorized? Not permissible. Not permissible. What is the position of Imam Taqiyuddin? Permissible. If there is a benefit for the waqf, you can move it. You can replace it with a better waqf. Sin is not a cause for blessing. المعصية لا تكون سببا للنعمة, or الرخص لا تناط بالمعاصي. Someone would need to look up the zihar issue. Does he have to pay it if his wife died? The kafara. Sheikh Ibrahim, can you look it up? Can you look up that question? If his wife died, does he still have to pay the kafara for zihar? Sin is not a cause for blessing. المعصية لا تكون سببا للنعمة. The other expression is الرخص لا تناط بالمعاصي. Concessions are not attached to acts of disobedience. We have different applications. if you put the wine in a sunny area to turn into vinegar, does it turn into vinegar? It turns into vinegar, of course, ontologically. But ruling-wise, does it become halal to eat that vinegar, to drink or to eat, I guess, that vinegar? To use that, to consume that vinegar? Is it halal to consume that vinegar? Of course, the madhab will say no, because الرخص لا تناط بالمعاصي. Concessions are not attached to sins. A person in a necessity during a journey of disobedience, is he permitted to eat carrion and shorten the prayer? The madhab says, no, not permitted. Imam Taqiyuddin says, yes, the guy will die. You know, he's sinning, but he will die if he doesn't eat carrion. So it is permissible for him to eat carrion, and then he needs to ask for forgiveness for his sin. Prohibited compensation, not returned, used for public benefit. Like, someone gets, basically, when you pay a fortune teller, whatever prohibited compensation, a prostitute repented. Should she return all the money she earned to the rightful owners? Technically, is this transaction permissible? The transaction was not permissible. Technically, the money belongs to whom? To the owner, to the rightful owner. However, technically the money that does not, so she got paid for services. Yeah, but if the transaction, think about it technically. This transaction, is it a permissible transaction? Does it lead to transfer of ownership? Doesn't lead to transfer of ownership. This money now, does it belong to her? Okay, so it belongs to him technically, but we will not give it back to him. It will be used for public benefit because of the ruling. الرخص لا تناط بالمعاصي. المعصية لا تكون سببا للنعمة. Because of that particular maxim. I need to finish the fifth one so that we have finished all the regulatory ones today. The prohibition, so read on your own the discussion on the three, the composite divorce. Necessity does not nullify the right of others. الاضطرار لا يبطل حق الغير. If you're forced by necessity to destroy someone else's property or harm their body, what happens if you're forced by necessity to destroy someone else's property or cause harm to them? If they were the cause of that necessity, you're not liable or sinful. If they are the cause of that necessity, like they wanted to assault you, you're not liable or sinful. Something falls on you and you push it away, property of somebody falls on you, you push it away, you destroy it, it falls into a well, you can't retrieve it, whatever happens, you're not liable. You're not sinful, and you're not liable. You're not sinful. If they were not the cause of that necessity, such as what? You are in a ship, and you needed to throw away some of the ship is going to sink, you needed to lighten the load, and you throw away some of people's properties. Are you liable? Sinful? Not liable, not sinful. You're not sinful, but you are liable. You're not sinful, but you are liable. Keep in mind, you're sitting in the ship, and someone on the second floor, their property drops on you while you're sitting on the deck, and you push it away, and it falls into the water. Are you sinful? No. Are you liable? No. But if ship is sinking, and there is the property of somebody has like something heavy, you take it, you throw it away into the ocean. Are you sinful? No. Are you liable? Yes. What if someone forces you to kill someone else? Are you sinful? Yes. الاضطرار لا يبطل حق الغير. الاضطرار لا يبطل حق الغير. Necessity does not nullify the rights of others. لا يفدي نفسه بأخيه. You don't sacrifice your brother for your own interest. So what happens in this case? Both of you will be liable for equal retribution, or qisas. Both of you are liable for equal retribution. Ibn Rajab's 77th قاعدة: من اتصل بملكه ملك غيره متميزا عنه وهو تابع له. If a person's property becomes connected to another's property in a way that remains distinguishable but is dependent upon it and separating, okay. So anyway, I'll summarize this for you because it's just like too involved. But it does show that الاضطرار لا يبطل حق الغير. Necessity does not nullify the rights of others. Someone rented a place from you and built a structure on it, or planted trees, something of that nature. What is going to happen here? What are we going to do here? Are we going to say, okay, the lease ended, that's it? You can, as the owner, you have the right, if you can remove that structure without harm, keep in mind, without harm, then you can remove it. But if removing that structure entails harm, then they will say, if a tenant plants crops or trees or constructs a building, on rented land, and the rental period ends, yet the owner does not remove what was planted or built, the landlord may claim ownership of the structures or trees at their value. So, because yes, you're the owner, and yes, this causes harm to you, that there is this structure, you didn't ask for it, but you acquire it at the value. More revealing of this qaida, and that is why I'm telling you that the zalim in Islam, the oppressor in Islam, still has rights. So وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان ليقوم الناس بالقسط. We have sent down with them the book and the balance for people to establish justice. Justice even with the oppressor. So if someone usurps another person's property and plants crops, not trees here, there is a difference in ruling between crops and trees, not trees, crops. And you reclaim your land. What are we doing with the crops? You have the option of reimbursing for expenses that usurper, reimbursing them for expenses, or giving the land to them in rent until they harvest the crop. Because basically, to destroy the crops would be fasad. To claim the crops will be getting more than your dues. And so the ruling in this case is, you're the person who was wrong, we will give you one of two options. Take them, or take the crops and reimburse him for expenses, or rent the land to him until he harvests his crops. Sheikh Ibrahim. To give you the answer. Okay, so he doesn't have to pay the kafara if she dies. Yeah, he doesn't have to pay the kafara if she dies, because in the Quran, what I wanted to say, but I didn't want to say it without being certain, min qabli an yatamassa, you know, so it keeps on repeating before they resume relationship. What if they will not yatamassa? Then doesn't have to pay the kafara. Wash the body, and what is it? Oh, it's not applicable. Yeah. That's it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.